on here. All right, and I believe now we are live. Welcome back to another Vanguard vlog, my friends. So this is where I talk about living on the front lines of life, particularly for the guys who are following me on Patreon, okay? You guys there, you're part of the Vanguard community. And I'm really excited to be doing these kinds of things. As I get kind of the feel for it down, I may be doing these more often. Maybe part of me wants to do these daily, just like have it on a schedule, show up first thing in the morning, have a set of topics to talk about, just deal with like what's happening in the world today. Any interesting things I've seen on social media, things people have shared to me, the questions obviously that I get from the guys, in the Discord and that sort of thing. And I think that would be pretty cool. But so I got a few topics to talk about today. The first thing is I figured I'd share with you guys what I just did a few minutes prior to going live. I was feeling pretty flat, and I knew I wanted to film one of these things today. And so I don't want to come on live flat because bad content, right? It doesn't best represent me. And also because I am excited to do these things. So what do you do when your emotions don't necessarily line up with the energy that you're trying to actually channel and work with and use? I think one of the best things that you can do is take some sort of action that can get that energy moving, right? And what I did was I did some handstands, which sounds kind of weird. Actually sounds very strange. But so let me give you some context, all right? So I've moved into my new place here, and for the first time I have a garage, and I started setting up a garage gym. And in order to minimize the equipment that I had to get, I've decided to make use of a decent amount of body weight sort of exercises. And I have a dip belt, so I can load up, dips and stuff like that pretty heavy, but I had trouble figuring out how am I going to do some heavy overhead pressing without getting a barbell, because I didn't feel like getting a barbell, because I have a hex bar that I actually prefer for a lot of reasons, but I can talk about that another time if anyone's interested. But so I was like, all right, how can I do some heavy overhead pressing? And then I realized, all right, my goal is to be able to do a handstand full depth push-up, and I've been working on that, and it's really hard. I can barely even handstand. I can do it with a wall, and I can do like a half handstand push-up against the wall, but I also got these parallettes, which are these things kind of they raise you up off the ground a little bit, and they allow you to go deeper, and so I could go all the way down with them. And I'm nowhere near to being able to do a full handstand push-up with that, but I'm working on it. So you guys, if you're curious about what my big personal habit changes are at the moment, is that I'm working on handstands, and then I'm also learning how to play piano, because I've always wanted to learn how to play piano. I know how to play guitar, but my piano and also my music theory skills are pretty weak. So currently I am learning how to reread music, because I knew how to do that when I was younger because I played the saxophone in grade school, but now I'm trying to develop that for piano as well. And so I'll keep you guys posted. I'm excited to see where I'm at in a year with both of these things. But yeah, so that's personally what I'm working on the habit sphere, beyond just, the typical, work and personal care routines and that kind of crap. But that's all. I kind of have all that stuff sort of nailed so far. So there's a few different topics here today. The first one I wanted to talk about was a concept that came back into my mind as really just because of my life, all right? And I noticed that there's a tendency, at least in myself, and I would assume, actually I know in other people too, is there's a tendency to turn down the volume on your desires, because especially for things that you will not get satisfied, okay? And I think, for any guy who's trying to quit porn, for example, that's one of the things he does. He tries to turn down his sexual desire. But I think this extends to other areas too, like turn down your desire for, the best job, best relationships, and, best physical fitness, best everything, okay? I think naturally we want a lot. Naturally we're hungry. We have incredibly intense desires, and we always try to turn that volume down because we're worried we're not going to get what we want, we're not going to be satisfied, we're not going to get these kinds of things. And the problem is then, as you start trying to turn these desires down, little things that normally that are actually in some ways beneath you, they start seeming acceptable. Because it's like, all right, so say you turn down your desire for, say you ultimately want a real, true, meaningful romantic relationship, and that's just burning deep in your heart. You want that connection. You want it to be the best possible thing you could possibly get. Well, if you turn that desire down, then all of a sudden, porn and maybe less authentic sexual activity starts seeming like a viable option. But if you keep that desire high, then all of a sudden these lesser things, they don't even register. It's like, no, that's beneath the dignity of what I truly want. And learning how to hold that desire and give it a place inside of you, I think can give you access to tremendous power, especially in the sexual realm. Like if you learn how to hold that hunger and say, instead of saying, oh, I'm horny, this is bad, I need to make this go away. Oh, I'm horny, I need to give myself an orgasm so I can release this tension. This tension's so bad. Honestly, that's like such a sex negative, by the whole sex positive crowd. That's an incredibly sex negative sort of attitude. It's the idea that I need to make my sexual desire go back into remission. I need to make it disappear. I need to nuke it. I need to obliterate it. But I think that's the opposite of sexual transmutation. If you learn how to hold that energy and give it a place inside of you, all of a sudden it fills you with this fire, this passion, even this dignity to know that you are a sexual being of incredible potency, and to acknowledge that there is no finite thing that can satisfy that hunger. Well, that's a powerful state to be in. And ultimately, I think that's where sexuality can channel you down a spiritual route where you realize, all right, there is no finite thing here that can satisfy this incredible desire that's inside of me. And you realize, all right, I need to start opening my desire up to the infinite. And this is sexual transmutation on a deep level, And so, I'm Catholic, and one of the things, like I guess in Christianity in general, there's this idea behind Jesus, his bride was the church. Okay, and obviously you got the Dan Browns and stuff. It's like, oh no, he ran a sex cult and and that kind of thing. But that aside, the traditional theology is that Jesus's bride was the church, and like that never made much sense to me until as I started experimenting with this kind of stuff of turning my desires up. I realized that like I want to unite with something bigger, and not just bigger for me, bigger for everyone. I want the best for everyone and everything. And you might call this like naive and whatever. And on some, like on a rational level, sure, maybe it is a little naive or whatever, but on an emotional level, it's a pure intention and it's a good intention. And if you learn how to channel and direct it well, then you can direct it in non-naive ways. And I think, by thinking like making the bride, your bride, the church. Okay, what would that mean for the practical person? It would mean making the thing that you channel all of your most intense emotional desires toward is the union of, and harmony of the human race, right? And so I think that this is non-trivial stuff. It's worth exploring and experimenting with inside of yourself. So that's my thoughts on that. One second. I had to close the door because there was some echo coming from it. All right, so before I go into the other topics, I have a question here from Tariq, one of my patrons. And he says, hi, Mark, can you do a video about how to deal with slips, please, including how to prevent them from turning into relapses? I came across an interesting analogy a few months ago about how if you have a puncture on your car tire, don't go slash the remaining tires. But as you know, this is exactly what we feel like doing. And I think Tariq is right on with this question. I think this is what happens to a lot of people. They have some area of their life slip. Maybe they're going well, they got their routines going, making these life changes, whatever, and then something slips, and all of a sudden they just say, screw it, and they just blow everything else up. And I think this is because people's sense of dignity is so tenuous in this modern age, meaning like the way in which they measure themselves is so conditional. And they measure their worth so conditionally. And as soon as they lose a few conditional status points, maybe something doesn't go well at work, maybe they get rejected by someone they asked out or whatever, all of a sudden they feel like their entire value has plummeted, and therefore they treat themselves as if they have low value. And ultimately this is a bad thing, because then they stop doing the things that take care of themselves. So The way in which you overcome this is by separating your status from your dignity. Status is a conditional thing, okay? Status is measurable in some form or another, and it matters. It matters in certain areas. Like, we all have financial status, we all have physical status, we all have sexual marketplace status, and each of these things matters in different amounts to you, but there is always some status that really does impact you and matter, okay? So we have to acknowledge that. That's just the way it works, and also we have to acknowledge that our emotional centers are connected to those measurements, meaning like the release of our neurochemicals, like serotonin primarily, is affected by our perception of status, okay? So that's just the way we work. That's just part of our nature, and I think it's good. I think, we should value certain things of high status. You're gonna hire the electrician who is of a higher status in terms of capability and competence than one who has a lower status as an electrician. Okay, that's just the way it works. We need these kinds of measurements to function well, both within ourselves and interpersonally. But the problem is you can't identify with your status, because as soon as you identify with some vector of status, whether for a lot of guys quitting porn, they do that. They identify their worth with their status in the rebooting process. So if they slip and they do something less than perfect, then all of a sudden they feel like they suck, and then they treat themselves like they suck, and they self-sabotage. And so you have to separate that your goodness, your inherent value as an individual is separate from whatever your status is. Meaning like the most, low-life scum bum person still has inherent dignity and worth and value. And this is what Jordan Peterson talks about all the time, the transcendent worth of the individual. It's this idea that in many ways is the foundation upon the ascendancy of the West. The reason why the West has been so incredibly successful is because they adopted this idea and integrated it within our legal system, to some extent. Imperfectly, but they have done it. And so you need to know this. You need to recognize that, okay, yeah, maybe I slipped here, maybe I lost some status here, and maybe that matters even. But I'm going to value myself enough, I'm going to embrace my inherent dignity enough to actually rectify this situation and make it better. It's a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift saying that, like, I'm unconditionally worth the effort of treating myself well and doing the work that will move me towards something good. Okay, and you need to have this talk with yourself. And Tariq, I would recommend you identifying what was the status hit that caused everything to crumble for you, and identify how you would want to respond differently next time. What are you going to remind yourself of? How are you going to look at things differently? And when you can do that and you can change that pattern, well then, you can stop slashing all your tires when one gets a little flat. So thanks for that question. That was a good one. Now, the other thing that was hitting me a little bit, looking at some of the discussion in the Discord, was one guy, he was kind of ashamed to record the fact that he was masturbating, okay? And particularly that word, and that word brought him shame. And one of the other guys was talking about how it's good to be explicit. It's good to acknowledge that shame, to acknowledge that there's something wrong with it. And this is something that's a hotly contested sort of idea. There's this idea out there in today's world where it's like, you should never feel ashamed of anything sexual. As long as it's consensual, let it in. And even if it's not consensual, as long as you're not acting on it, let it in. It's all good. Do not repress anything. First, there's a distinction between repression and consciously rejecting something. Repression's when you're afraid of something, right? And I think sexual repression is bad, meaning like, I'm afraid of my sexuality, so I'm going to squash it down. It's evil. It's bad. Squash it down. No, that's screwed up. And a lot of people, I think, do that, specifically on more fundamentalist religious sides. But that's often not even what those religions really teach at their core. And some, they do. But ultimately, that kind of repression is bad. What's different from that is to say, all right, this emotional desire, sexual or not, let's see how true it is. Let's see how accurate it is. Let's see how authentic it is, okay? So, for example, there's a guy who maybe, he's married And part of him, he sees a woman and he's sexually attracted to her. All right. That sexual urge, it's saying, I want to fuck her. I want to do something to her. All right. And how true is that? Well, maybe one part of him's true. That's true. But another part, it's not true at all. It doesn't represent who he is at all. He wants to be faithful to his wife. He doesn't know this woman. Sex means more to him than just, scratching this itch, whatever. And so it's like for him to say, no, sorry, emotion, you're incorrect. That's not repression. Okay? That's not repression. And it's understandable that someone might feel even shame over having an urge inside of them that is so misaligned from who they actually believe they are. And I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's bad. It's just looking at how our brain works. It's like, if you allow that shame to exist next to that desire, eventually that's going to influence the wiring. So if you repress the shame, then what you're doing is you're repressing the counteractive force in your head. And so that there's only pleasure when that desire comes up, only the thought of pleasure. But there needs to be a corresponding pain that keeps you, that helps you develop restraint and discipline and these kinds of things. And again, if you go back to what I was saying earlier about disconnecting your dignity as a person from your status, then at that point, like, you can recognize that even if your emotions show up in a misaligned way, that doesn't mean you are bad. That just might mean that you have some emotional or psychological conditioning that doesn't necessarily serve you well, okay? And it just got me thinking about the whole issue around porn in general. Because it's like, if you peel back the, what do we want to call it? The film of familiarity around porn. So most guys, it's like brushing their teeth. It's just something they do. It's super normal. Feels super natural. But if you peel that back, it's the most absurd behavior. Like, I was thinking about it like this. What if you were going to try to describe porn to someone who grew up in the 1800s or something like that? Okay. They'd be like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, dude, no, it's awesome. It's like, all right, everybody's got these little screens, they got these screens, and on it you get to watch people have sex. And they're like, what? Okay, that's kind of weird. But why do you do that? He's like, oh, so then you can get some hand lotion and stuff, and then you can rub your penis to it, and then you can orgasm, pretend you're having sex with them. And they would look at you like, what the hell are you talking about? That's absurd. Why would people do that? He's like, no, man, you don't get it. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's like, everybody does it. And they would just think you're nuts. They would think it's the most disgusting, emasculating behavior ever to sit hunched over a screen and sweatily beat your meat to other people having sex that you're not even connected to. It's just an absurd behavior, but it's become so commonplace. And I think it's right to feel ashamed of that behavior when you really zoom the camera back and look at it. It's the most emasculating thing ever. So I don't know if any of you have ever thought about it like that, but it's pretty crazy. But the problem is, to one, the part of your brain that controls your sexual neurochemicals, it can't tell the difference. So it's you need to develop your rational mind. You need to develop your intellect. You need to develop the strength and conditioning of your prefrontal cortex to break the illusion that there's an actual sexual experience happening in front of you. But that's what all my other work's about. So, and the final topic I wanted to hit on here that I came into the call with was the idea of priests marrying. And I can't remember if it was on a live stream or if it was just in the Vanguard community where I was talking about this, but I have expressed the idea that I feel like it's screwed up that they don't let priests marry. Well, maybe not screwed up, but that priests should be allowed to marry because there's no biblical support for making sure that priests don't marry. And in the past, they actually were allowed to. And in certain branches and weird exceptions, priests do marry. And then also, throughout history, many popes have actually married and that sort of thing for all different kinds of reasons. So we were just looking at the reasons for it, and some people brought up some good points for and some good points against. One of the interesting points against it was this idea of by marrying the church, okay, kind of modeling that whole idea of what Jesus was saying earlier, that's such an ideal. Why would you want to get rid of that? And I don't think I do. I think that there's different kinds of celibacy, and there's different ways in which you can act out a celibate activity. Okay, so this is what I think. Okay, on the highest level, and probably the ideal for a priest, I would say, would be the fully celibate yet transmuting man. Okay, and I would argue this guy can be hyper masculine. This ties up the stuff I was talking about earlier, like turning on your sex drive and holding it up. And he's intensely connected to his sexual hunger and desire, but he's completely chosen to channel it toward that beautiful woman of life, that beautiful woman of the church, of a unified humanity. He's decided to make that his bride, that he channels all of his sexual energy to serving. And I would say that this might be, that this is an incredible masculine figurehead. And there are priests like that in the church who model that. And I think that that's the idea, is that by forcing celibacy, you can get more of that. But the problem is you don't get always that, especially because I don't think the church does a good job of teaching priests and men in general how to do that. That's in many ways why I do this work, is talking about the specifics of how to do that. But you end up with a lot of other stuff too. You end up with guys who are not the best, representations of celibacy. Maybe they're sexually repressed. They're actually afraid of their sexuality. They think it's evil, and they squash it down, and they cut off their community, and all of a sudden they come up as these effeminate men who have no authenticity. It's like you don't know what it's like to be a man, so don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me I can't have sex if you're over there completely asexual. Okay, it's like that's a turnoff. And I'm trying to avoid criticizing priests, because I think it's a hard job, and I think we need more of them and people willing to dedicate their lives to serving a greater good like that. But that's a different conversation. So bless me, God, if I'm doing something wrong here by talking about this kind of stuff critically, because you're not supposed to criticize priests in Catholicism. But I'm criticizing this teaching. Okay, so it's like on one hand you have the fully transmuted celibate, then you have the sexually repressed celibate. And then you have the sexually kind of deviant celibate who's like, all right, their sexuality's screwed up and they know they can't find a place for it in the regular world. So they're gonna find some vocation where it's normal and fine for them to not be in a relationship. Okay. And that's where I think the pedophile stuff, and there's a lot of apparently homosexual priests too. And, homosexuality is a different thing, obviously, than pedophilia or other sort of deviancy. But some would argue it isn't. That's a whole other conversation. But I think it does attract that. But then, okay, so you have those options. You got, and what would the ability to allowing priests to marry do? Okay, well, that would allow for sexually normal, sexually connected men to take roles of leadership within the church. The essential role of leadership in the church, which is, the priest, I guess. And so I see it as a good thing. Would it be a necessary thing? I don't know. We'll see. See how the church grows and thrives and what kind of stuff happens to it. But I think that since there's actually no hardcore grounds against it, I don't see why it shouldn't happen, especially when I know there's a bunch of great guys out there who would make tremendous priests, but they're married. And instead, we don't have them, and we have other kinds of issues. So I don't know. We'll see. I might get in hot water with other Catholics around that, but that's my thoughts on it. So let's see what we got here in the chats. Someone whose name I cannot pronounce. Is that Russian or Ukrainian or something? I don't know. He says, how can I get your mentoring if possible? Go to my Patreon, patreon.com/universalman. And that's where you can check out that kind of stuff. Or if you want the legit one-on-one hardcore stuff, then go to universalman.com and check out the coaching page. That bit, you're struggling, man. He says he relapsed. All right, that happens, dude. You just gotta fail forward. That's the way it works. Is you can't just say I'm gonna be this and this, and then have it magically happen just through force of will. Often there are some internal changes and reconfigurations that need to occur. And so every failure from that point is an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to shift. It's an opportunity to change. And so that's what I would focus on doing if I were you, is making sure you're learning from every single relapse. Ahmet says, what do you think about Machiavellianism and virtue? In the wild world, you got to be a wolf to achieve success, but you know ethics. And so I think okay. So I think this is something I got from Peterson, who got from the Bible, which is apparently the proper way to interpret the passage of blessed are the meek. And what that passage actually translates to is, blessed are those who know how to use the sword, but choose not to. So in terms of your question, that means like, learn how to be the baddest motherfucker that you can be, but then don't be bad. Be good. All right. Develop extreme competence and potency inside of yourself, but use that for goodness. You know, that's why I can be a supporter of guns and combat arts and, you know, learning, you know, the various vectors of modern warfare, you know, psychological, cyber, physical, all that kind of stuff. But also, you know, you want to use that knowledge to protect against the evil, and that would come at you, your family, and, you know, society at large. So I think, you know, develop that Machiavellian virtue, but don't let that be your primary virtue. That's a good question. I should do a video about that. Our Pitt's reading Reboot Regimen because he's a badass. If you guys want Reboot Regimen, then make sure you click the link in the description. Do I have that on here in the description? No, I don't think I do. You can go to universalman.com and then sign up there, because it's a great guide that I wrote. All right. I think we got some good stuff here. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Good questions, everybody. Not gonna get to them all. Did a mentoring call already this morning. I got one this evening, so I just wanted to pop on and share the thoughts that I had prepared. But thank you guys for showing up, and as always, stay sharp.